The sun beat down, a hammer blow on dust and despair. It shimmered off the coarse fabric of her dress, clinging to skin long unwashed, worn smooth by fear and flight. She stood on the platform, a woman stripped bare of everything but breath, under the indifferent sky. Faces blurred below, hard lines carved by sun and calculation. Their eyes, cold and appraising, measured muscle, estimated endurance, weighed past trauma against future profit. The air tasted of grit and the metallic tang of desperation. Her name felt like a forgotten language, her identity reduced to a price tag, a commodity to be bartered and sold. The auctioneer's voice was a whip crack, sharp and devoid of mercy, detailing her meager strengths, glossing over the horrors that had brought her here. Each word flayed a layer of her remaining dignity. Below, hands gestured, voices called out numbers, a chorus of indifference that echoed the emptiness settling deep in her chest. She kept her gaze fixed on the warped planks beneath her feet, trying to disappear inside herself, to make her heart slow its frantic drum against her ribs. But the noise was relentless, the scrutiny of physical weight. She heard the final number called, higher than she'd expected, surprising even the auctioneer. And then, a name. Not hers, but the buyer's. Silas. A name rough as stone. She risked a glance. He stood apart, a figure silhouetted against the glare, broad-shouldered and still. Not one of the eager, leering men near the front, but back by the edge of the crowd, where shadows clung longer. His face was obscured by the brim of his hat, unreadable. He simply nodded when the auctioneer confirmed the sale. The gavel fell, a sound like the snapping of her last thread of hope. She was chattel. She belonged to a stranger named Silas. A man she knew nothing about, whose gaze she could not meet. A man who had just paid coin for her existence. She was led down, her legs trembling. The dust swirled around her ankles. The faces watched, some smirking, some simply moving on to the next lot. She felt like a ghost already, haunting her own body. He waited by a sturdy wagon, a single horse harnessed to it. No other men with him, just him, large and silent. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't speak. He simply motioned with his head towards the back of the wagon. She understood. Climb in. The wood was rough beneath her fingers as she pulled herself up, every movement stiff with exhaustion and dread. She sat with her back against the side, knees drawn up slightly, watching him. He wasn't cruel in his movements, not overtly, just efficient. He climbed into the driver's seat without a word. The wagon lurched forward, away from the noise and the faces, heading out into the vast, empty land that stretched to the horizon under the relentless sun. She didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. Only the unknown road ahead, and the silent man who now owned her. The silence stretched, heavy and unbroken save for the creak of the wagon wheels and the soft thud of the horses' hooves on the dusty track. Miles melted into miles, the landscape a monotonous canvas of brown and ochre under a sky that bled from harsh blue to softening gold as the day wore on. She stole glances at him from beneath lowered lids. Silas. He sat straight-backed, reins held loosely, eyes fixed on the horizon. His profile was rugged, lines carved by sun and wind, unyielding. He wore simple, functional clothes, denim, leather. No ornamentation, nothing to speak of wealth or cruelty, only utility. Her mind churned, trapped in a cage of apprehension. Where was he taking her? What would he demand? The stories whispered in the dark places she'd passed through rose unbidden, tales of hardship, of brutality, of lives broken on lonely ranches. She braced herself for the worst, her muscles tensing with anticipated blows, her spirit recoiling from expected degradation. Yet nothing came. No harsh commands, no probing questions, not even a glance her way. He was simply driving. As evening deepened, painting the sky in hues of violet and orange, he pulled the wagon to a stop near a stand of gnarled trees. He dismounted, his movements economical. He didn't speak, just began unharnessing the horse. He then took out a bedroll from the wagon bed, unrolled it on the ground some distance from the wagon, and sat down. From a satchel, he produced hardtack and dried meat. He offered her some, extending a hand with the food in his palm. No words. She hesitated, hunger a sharp ache, but fear held her frozen for a moment. Was it a test? She reached out slowly, taking the offering. Her fingers brushed his. His skin was calloused, rough. He didn't retract his hand until she had taken the food. She ate slowly, the dry food scratching her throat. He ate his own portion in silence, watching the twilight deepen. He didn't build a fire, perhaps too risky or too much trouble. He didn't touch her. He didn't even look at her for long stretches. When darkness fully descended, he lay down on his bedroll, his form a dark shape against the paler ground. He made no move towards her. Hesitantly, she settled down in the wagon bed, wrapping her thin arms around herself against the growing chill. She expected him to come to her in the night, to assert his ownership. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the night, listening to his quiet breathing. He slept, undisturbed. As the first hint of gray lightened the eastern sky, he stirred. He was up before the sun, reharnessing the horse. He offered more food, the same silent gesture. They ate, and they were on the road again before the world was fully awake. The pattern of silent competence and unexpected, minimal provision repeated.
No cruelty.
No kindness either, not in the way she understood it. Just a strange, quiet functionality. Her fear began to mingle with confusion. He was not what she had braced herself for. He was something else entirely. A puzzle she couldn't solve with the brutal logic of her past. Days bled into a week, then more of relentless travel. The land grew more rugged, the mountains looming closer, their peaks dusted with early snow. Finally, the wagon track narrowed, winding through a canyon until they emerged into a small, hidden valley. Here, nestled beside a stream, stood a cabin simple, sturdy, built of logs. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. This was his home, and now hers in whatever strange capacity he intended. He stopped the wagon. Again, the silent dismount, the unharnessing. He led the horse to a small corral near a barn-like structure. Then he walked to the cabin door and opened it. He didn't step inside, just stood aside and gestured. Go in. She hesitated for only a moment, the ingrained habit of obedience overriding the tremor of uncertainty. Stepping across the threshold was like crossing into another world. The air inside was warm, smelling of wood smoke and dried herbs. It was Spartan but clean. A rough-hewn table, a few chairs, a stone hearth, a narrow cot in one corner. Simple necessities, nothing more. He followed her in, closing the door behind them, shutting out the vast, indifferent landscape. He spoke then, his voice low and rough, little used. Wash up. Food's on the table. He indicated a pot simmering over the low fire in the hearth. He didn't watch her. He moved to a cupboard, taking out simple provisions, storing them away. There was a basin and a pitcher of water on a stand near the door. The water was cold, but washing the layers of travel and fear from her face felt like a small, impossible luxury. She ate the stew he'd prepared, root vegetables, dried meat, simple but nourishing. He ate his own meal in silence. The routine of the ranch settled upon her, a quiet, demanding rhythm. There were chores, fetching water from the stream, collecting firewood, tending a small patch of tough vegetables, mending fences with wire and pliers clumsy in her hands. He worked mostly with the small herd of cattle scattered across the valley, or repairing the barn or tending to the horse. They worked separately, but their tasks intertwined. She learned to anticipate his movements, the subtle shift in his posture that meant he needed a tool, the way he would leave a task unfinished for her to complete. He didn't supervise her closely, didn't bark orders. He showed her what needed doing once, sometimes twice, then left her to it. If she struggled, he would appear, his shadow falling silently over her, and without a word, demonstrate the correct way, his hands strong and capable. Sometimes, working in the field, she would look up and find him watching her from a distance, his expression still unreadable. Not judging, not demanding, just observing. Slowly, hesitantly, A fragile sense of self began to re-emerge. The constant, gnawing fear began to recede, replaced by a quiet determination to do the work well, to prove her worth not to him, but to herself. She was not just a body for sale. She had hands that could work, a mind that could learn. But the question remained, hanging unspoken between them in the vast silence of the valley. What was she to him? A hired hand? A companion? Or still, fundamentally, property? The ambiguity was a constant, low-grade anxiety. One sweltering afternoon, as she knelt by the stream washing clothes, a rider appeared on the ridge overlooking the valley. He was not Silas. The man was broad, loud even from a distance, his voice carrying on the still air as he rode down towards the cabin. Anya froze, her heart lurching. Strangers were rare and usually brought trouble. Silas emerged from the barn, watching the rider approach. The man reined in his horse near Silas, dismounting with a swagger. He was fleshy, his face red and coarse, his eyes scanning the valley, landing on Anya by the stream. He grinned, a wide, unpleasant slash across his face. "Silas, didn't know you took on help." And that kind of help, no less. His gaze lingered on her, filled with assumption and lewd appraisal. Anya felt her skin crawl. This was the kind of man she had seen at the auction, the kind whose eyes measured flesh and subservience. Silas didn't return the grin. His face remained impassive, but a stillness settled over him, a quiet intensity that was more potent than any shout. "She works here," Silas stated, his voice low and flat, but carrying an unexpected weight. The man chuckled, a rattling sound. "Works? That what they call it now? Heard they had a sale down in Oakhaven a while back. Picked her up there. Did you? Cheap labor, eh? Or maybe not just labor, if you know what I mean." He winked broadly. Anya felt shame rise like bile in her throat. She wanted to sink into the earth. This was it. This was how the world saw her, defined her. Property. Plaything. Silas took a step forward, his posture subtly shifting. He didn't raise his voice, but his gaze was steady, fixed on the man. "She works here. She's under my roof. That's all there is to it." The air grew taut. The man's grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. He seemed to sense something in Silas, a quiet strength he hadn't expected. He shrugged, a show of indifference that didn't quite land. All right, just passing through. Mind if I water my horse?" Silas simply gestured towards the stream, his eyes never leaving the man until he led his horse past Anya, still casting glances, though less bold now. Anya finished her washing, her hands trembling slightly. She kept her head down. The man eventually rode off, his presence leaving a stain on the quiet valley. When he was gone, Silas walked over to where she knelt. He stopped a few feet away. He didn't offer comfort, not in words. He simply stood there, his presence a solid, silent bulwark against the ugliness that had just intruded. After a long moment, he spoke, his voice still low, directed at the water more than at her. "You don't owe him anything. Or anyone who talks like that. It wasn't much." But to Anya, after months of silence, after the callousness of the world, it was a revelation. He hadn't defended her as property. He had defended her right to simply be there, unmolested, treated with dignity. He had drawn a line. In that moment, the ambiguity dissolved. She was not property here. She was something else, something respected in his quiet way. She looked up at him, really looked, past the stoicism to the man beneath. She saw not a master, but a solitary figure offering sanctuary, quietly, without fanfare or expectation. The fear that had been her constant companion for so long finally loosened its grip. It was replaced by a profound sense of relief and something akin to gratitude, a warmth spreading through her chest. The ranch wasn't just a place of labor. It was a haven, built and guarded by this quiet, unassuming man. She stood up, the wet clothes forgotten for a moment. She looked not at Silas, but out at the valley, bathed in the afternoon light. It was harsh, demanding, but it was also vast and beautiful and, for the first time, it felt like it could hold her. She was still standing there when Silas turned and walked back towards the cabin, leaving her in the stillness, forever changed by the quiet decision of a benevolent rancher and the resilience she found within herself. The past was a shadow, but the valley, and the life she was building in it, was real, tangible, and filled with the quiet promise of a future earned, not given.